your worth is not dependent on other people's ability to see it.
What if the thing holding you back isn't your talent, your ambition, or even your opportunities, but the way you've been told to measure success? Today's guest, Sarah Sun Kanell, knows all about breaking through expectations. She's the youngest guest I've ever had on the show, and yet she's already rewriting the rule book on leadership, influence, and what it means to truly make an impact. She's the first Asian American Miss Utah and is currently the Student Body President of BYU. But her story isn't about the titles. It's about what she's done with them. From advocating for justice-impacted individuals to leading initiatives for second chance hiring and prison education, Sarah's work proves that age isn't a barrier to creating real change. In this episode, Sarah shares her journey from her immigrant roots to her fight to represent women in leadership roles, to how she's pushing for ambition and faith to coexist unapologetically. Get ready to feel inspired, challenged, and reminded of what's possible when you own your story and when you step into your power. This conversation is for anyone who's ever felt like the underdog, questioned their place, or wanted to make a difference, but didn't know where to start. Let's dive in. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is such a blast. Sarah sent over a few things that she was thinking about talking. I had asked for it. Like, what are some things on your mind? What are you thinking about? And I've had the hardest time weeding any one of those talking points out because you just have so many thoughtful things that you want to share with the world that you've already experienced. You're 22, which is going to blow everyone's minds when they listen to this episode. And you've done so much. So I am just thrilled that you would make time to come on and join me today and for all the things we're going to talk about.
Thank you so much. I honestly feel the same way about you. You're amazing, so brilliant. And if it makes you feel any better, I'm actually 24.
Oh, good.
So Wikipedia is wrong.
So much better, Sarah.
I don't know who put that information there, but I was born in 2000, year of the dragon.
Yes,
so
girl.
2024 was a good year. But yes, I am just so excited to talk about things that I think both of us care about, particularly women in leadership and women who just want to make an impact in the world. I think we both see that in all the people who surround us in our communities. And I'm excited to see where this conversation takes us.
Me too. So first off, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background.
For sure. So I grew up in Cedar City, Utah, a very small town. It was like population 30,000.
I grew up in St. George. I did not know this. I love this connection.
Did you go to Dixie High?
Snow Canyon.
What?
Yes.
That's crazy. That's crazy. I remember every time I went to Snow Canyon, it was for debate tournaments. And every time we went there, Cedar High School would win. So I have good memories of Snow Canyon High.
But did anybody else notice that flex?
I didn't say I won. It was a Cedar High one. But so I grew up in Southern Utah, and then I moved to Salt Lake when I was about to start my junior year of high school. And I graduated from Skyline. I lived in East High boundaries, but I wanted to do the International Baccalaureate program. So that's why I went to Skyline, go Eags. And at the time, my mom was pursuing her PhD at the University of Utah. So for those 2 years, we lived in student housing at University Village. And
no way.
Yeah, it was a trip. And it was also during that time period where I joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the people in my congregation ended up being incredibly influential. My Relief Society president was Kate Holbrook Brown, who was the managing historian for the church history department, an absolutely brilliant, just incredible woman. And to be influenced by her in that time changed my life so much. And so many people in that word shaped who I wanted to be, because I saw that not only were they ambitious, but their ambition was fueled by a desire to serve people and from a love of God and of seeing people as their brothers and sisters. And I just knew that what the principles and values they were living their lives upon were good and true. And that catalyzed a huge journey for me. After I graduated high school, I went to Cornell for a year. It was a fun time, but then something called COVID-19 happened before I finished my freshman year. And I was like, okay, well, what's the best thing I can do right now to help people during a pretty tricky time in history? So I decided to serve a mission. I sent to Southern California. I wore a pioneer dress and gave tours at the Mormon Battalion Historic Site for 4 months. And then I went to do like standard missionary work in Riverside County after that. And then it was there where I had spent so much time teaching people to seek revelation for their lives and to seek inspiration from God. And I felt like for my own life, I felt really drawn to come to BYU, which was a huge shift in trajectory. Growing up as the daughter of immigrants, education was always so important. And people from Southern Utah whose parents didn't really go to college don't typically end up in those places. So to have gone to Cornell was a really big deal for me, and was the result of a lot of really hard work. But I just knew that I needed to come to BYU. So I did, and I absolutely love BYU. And from there, I've just tried to really drink in the student experience. I was on a song and dance ensemble called the Young Ambassadors. They were the first American university group to go to China, which is something that really drew me in. Being of Chinese descent, I participated in an organization for scholarship money, the Miss Utah program. I went because I just wanted to earn some tuition. And after I'd won my local program, they decided, hey, we're going to add back the glam. And suddenly I was competing in a pageant when I had not signed up for a pageant. But Miss Utah was a great experience. And now I'm currently Student Body President at BYU. And after that, I'll be a management consultant at Bain Company. So that is me in a nutshell.
So cool. What a path. And like what interesting places you were taken in really interesting ways. Like thinking about small town Cedar City, Utah. Mm-hmm. We both know what that looks and feels like. St. George, when I grew up, was probably really similar to Cedar City when you grew up. St. George is bigger now, but like really small town and really incredible people and families and incredible moms. Like I got to see some really incredible mothers who mostly were home with their children. And for me, that was the one way I could really see. But then have you be taken up to Salt Lake and to see Kate Holbrook, which is, I'm so jealous of that experience for so many reasons, and live in student housing and what you gained from that and what a shift that was, but a continuation of your story in so many ways. So interesting. Well, let's go back to your mom for just a second, can we? Because I love this piece of your story. I only know a little bit about it. She immigrated
to the United States.
To the U.S. And were you born yet? Or was that before?
My older sister was born in China, and she came to the U.S. as really just my sister and her violin in hand.
By herself?
Yeah.
Wow.
And my mom has just been such an amazing role model to me. She has like this signature smile. Her name's Ling. And everybody who knows Ling knows her as a lady who's always smiling and always has like candy in her purse. She'll always like be like making dumplings and delivering them to the neighbors. And just like the kindest person. But beneath all this like goodness and sparkle that she carries with her all the time is a woman who's been through a lot. And something that has always inspired me is that whenever she's in the face of something hard, she never questions herself. She never she never finds time to just dwell in the problem. Like she's immediately thinking, this is for my good. What can I do next? And part of that attitude, I really think it must be a spiritual gift because she's exemplified that from the time she was young. And that's the reason why she was able to get an education, because she grew up in a tiny, tiny town in rural China where did not come from money. And during this time, it was after the Cultural Revolution. So education was very hard to access. And if she were not to have had some route to get specialized training, was not going to go to school, quite frankly. Like that opportunity just didn't exist. So she was 13 when she decided to take her life into her own hands. And she had found a violin in a garbage can.
No way.
Yes. And was like, hey, music is a specialized trade in this country. So after a hard day of work, she'd come back home. She would stuff strings underneath, she'd stuff cloth underneath the violin strings to muffle the sound of her playing so her neighbors wouldn't like turn her in. But she'd practice for hours and hours until her fingers bled. And this just was a pattern that happened for years and years until she had a chance to audition for the Wuhan Conservatory of Music. And here's a story that really just puts who she is into perspective, and I think touches on a lot of the things that we're going to talk about later about confidence, about leadership. So after all those years of sacrifice, blood, sweat, tears, she and her dad put together all their money from their whole family. She had 4 sisters. They pulled all their money to get 2 train tickets to go to this big city to audition. So they get there. She plays her pieces just flawlessly. And then later that night, she found out that she didn't make the cut for the second round. And after everything, like to have been told no, must have been devastating. But with all the opposition she had already faced getting there to begin with. I think if I were in her shoes, I'd have just been like, oh, well, this wasn't meant for me. But her father said, I know who you are and I know what you're capable of. And your worth is not dependent on other people's ability to see it. So tomorrow you go back there and you share your talent with anybody who will listen. So she went back the next day. She was a person there and just played her violin out in the hallway until one of the judges walked by and he said, wow, you sound incredible. Can't wait to hear you later. And she's like, actually, you won't be because I didn't make the cut. And he said, that surely must be a mistake. Why don't you come in right now and I'll give you an audition?
No way.
And out of the 1,000 people that auditioned, 3 got in, and she was one of the 3. And when I think about what she accomplished because her father believed in her, I just can never ignore the knowledge I have that I have a Heavenly Father that believes in me the same way. And I think the combination of being raised by someone as incredible as Ling and also this faith that I've developed later on in life have come together to really give me a sense of purpose and direction when I think about what I want my impact to be while have the opportunity to be alive. And it's really shaped the issues that I care about as well.
Oh, incredible. I need to get Ling on this podcast as well.
Oh yeah, she's a hoot. The thing is, she doesn't realize she's bad at it. Like she'll just be like, "Oh, you're so cute." I hope you get to meet her one day. I hope everybody gets to meet her. Too.
It's incredible. What a story. How has that? You mentioned that impacted the impact you hope to make and the platforms you've already spoken to and worked on. In what way? What are the things that have been impacted directly or that you've chosen to focus on because of being raised by Ling?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, she is just so strong and so selfless and kind and giving and poured her all into raising her 3 kids. And on top of that, she always knew that education was important to her and she never gave up on her dreams. In fact, she graduated with her PhD at age 62.
Wow.
After a lifetime of learning. She also has like 3 master's degrees now. I don't know. I just remember being 9 years old and she'd come home and she'd be like, my professor said my English is bad. So Sarah, I need you to tutor me every day. So we'd sit down every day and all of her assignments, all of her emails that she would read, I would just comb over. And from the time I was really young, I knew that my education wasn't just to get good grades because that was expected of me. It was like, if I learn these principles, like I can come home and directly help my mother. Like when I'm learning about math, like she didn't ever have a chance to learn algebra even. Like all these things that I learned, whether it was math, science, English, literature, I knew that there was a direct application to expand the purview of my family and my future family. And she was always such a happy learner. No matter how old I was, she would always say, Sarah, I'm so happy to learn from you. Wow. Such a humble learning attitude. But also it kind of revealed that other people don't always see people the way that they should. Because to me, she's this hero, but then she'd go out into the workforce and people would say, your English isn't good enough. Like, you're weird, you XYZ, these things that were deeply offensive to me as her daughter. I can't even imagine how she felt, but she would never, reveal any negative feelings. But I just remember there were times where it just felt like it was she and I against the world. And no matter what would happen though, no matter how much she was struggling, she never let her heartbreak make her small. And she never let my heartbreak make me feel small. And to this day, I still know that Ling would give me the last dumpling while pretending not to be hungry, because she's just that kind of lady. But I know that she's given a lot, despite not having a lot to give. So because of her influence, I'm really passionate about fighting for the underdog. When I was Miss Utah, my social impact initiative was about advocating for people in prison as they re-enter the workforce. Mm. So I had the opportunity to initiate a second chance hiring task force with the Lieutenant Governor of Utah. And I was able to teach a college level course at the Utah State Prison and really work with this population who is oftentimes forgotten about and who has every right to change and to move forward and be contributing members of society if that's what they want to do. But unfortunately, there are just systemic barriers that prevent that from happening. So I think whenever I see people who are, quote, on the fringes, I think of my mom and I think of myself. And I think I hope that answers your question.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure just knowing already some of the other things you've done, this whole episode could be about how Ling inspired me. And here's all the things I've done because of the perspective I had and what I grew up with and who she was. And what an incredible project, though, in the prisons. That's not been a place where I've spent a lot of mental energy with like the people who are incarcerated. And it's a huge portion of our population.
Mm-hmm.
And it's frightening to think. I actually watched a really interesting documentary about it last fall. And I think I'm going to have a guest on this podcast who was in that documentary, who's a former inmate. And I'm thrilled about that. Honestly, watching that documentary for me was incredibly eye-opening. And I was humbled almost to the point of humiliation to think, I don't know the last time I thought about people in prisons. They're just not on my mind. I don't even think about it. And how many people are there? So the fact that you had that experience and you're thoughtful of these people who need the advocacy. And obviously our common friend, Shima Boffman, has done so much work there and has such a heart for people there from her own background as well. And, but there's so many places we can get involved and do good.
Absolutely. What was the name of that documentary you watched?
26.2 to Life.
Okay.
For Life.
Okay.
It's so good. It's so good. You can get on ESPN Plus.
Okay.
And
I know what my husband and I are doing for date night.
Please do.
Cool.
It's amazing thinking about, again, like I have a lot of women who I'm in conversation with who are all in on thinking, I want to do good for the world and I want to somehow find a platform that I can contribute to or start. But I'm kind of waiting for God to tell me what I can do or tell me where to go. And this, you didn't ask this, but if you want to know my number one pet peeve, it might be that. Where I'm just like, why? Well, then why are you waiting? And then maybe in the meantime, go do something.
Right.
Go find something because there are so many people who need help.
Absolutely.
Just start somewhere. And here's another platform that was nowhere on my radar. Go find someone who's in a situation like this.
I absolutely love that. If somebody is out there thinking, what can I do? If you're a small business owner or if you have a lot of influence in a company, giving people with a criminal record a fair shot at working for you could be extremely beneficial. Because studies have shown that justice impacted individuals tend to be more loyal to their employers. They work harder. They know these opportunities don't come easily. There's a federal initiative that will give your company $2,400 for employing somebody who has a criminal background. So there are like legitimate financial incentives to do so, but also you could be changing a life. And these are the solutions that are actually going to make a difference in the way society heals from a justice system that many consider to be broken. And especially the women who are impacted by it. And that could be an entirely other podcast as well. But I also love, Lizzy, what you said about finding, I guess, a purpose or a passion to advocate for and sort of waiting around to be told what to do, to just stand up and to do it. And I think part of the reason why sometimes maybe we as women feel like limited, I guess, is because there's this stereotype around women with ambition. And oftentimes society penalizes women for having the same attributes that would be viewed very favorably by if they were male. And that is something that I have been thinking about a ton as a woman now in a male-dominated major and in a major leadership position at a pretty big school. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
I'd love to talk a little more about that, actually. Let's talk about ambition.
Sure.
It definitely, if you were to say about someone, yeah, she's just really ambitious, I would probably say most people's mind would be like, ooh, that's pretty negative. Like you wouldn't automatically assume or think that I meant that as a compliment because we think of ambition as a really negative thing and social climbing.
That devastates me. That's so sad.
Amen. Why do you think that is? Why do you think, and maybe the same could be said for men. Like there is a level of ambition if it is tearing other people down and it's for the sake of building yourself up. Like I can see that. But we have taken it to an extreme, knowing that so many people need help, knowing that so many people need a hand up right now.
Yeah.
But then when someone is ambitious to go do good, we're like, oh.
It's like the audacity. Here's my take. I feel like it's because, okay, when you think of like women, like in the 1700s, 1800s, just as things were starting to get a little bit better. I mean, that's really relative, but like, they were counted as individuals.
They were human for
Yep. Like the only way for a woman to be ambitious in that time was to kind of marry up. Like education was not an option for most people. It's not like you could wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a neurosurgeon. It's like, haha, no, you're not. That field doesn't even exist at this point in time. But I think this idea of like women being ambitious was really had a really close connotation to women using others in order to achieve self-serving aims. And maybe that's just stuck with society. I think also the media portrays women as being really competitive with other women when they're ambitious. But the thing is, I think about this connotation of ambitious women are bad. Like, I think the only time that ambitious women have gotten a time under the spotlight is in movies where they're being portrayed as accessories to men, right? So if you have a stock character who is making an appearance in this film or this story solely to serve as like, you know, the beautiful woman trope, and another woman enters this storyline, first of all, is it going to pass the Bechdel test? Probably not. But secondly, for most of these plots, we just see like, oh, I'm going to win over this man. I'm more beautiful, blah, 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 bickering over things that don't matter. And in real life, women are not like that. And at least the women in my life, like it's heartbreaking to see how the lack of representation of women as dimensional beings in media and on social media impacts the way women view how high or low the ceiling is for them in their personal lives. I'm going to let you talk. I just went on for a long time.
Sarah, so beautifully said. I didn't want to talk because I was just like, No. And I hadn't even thought of that. And I hadn't even thought of that. Ambition in the past, you had to use someone else.
Right.
Ambition now is saying, I have a brain, I have the connections that I have whatever the resources are that are in my circle. How can I go make good?
Yes.
We've totally changed the conversation around it.
Yes.
But that word is still a little slow to change. And you pointing out the background, I think, is actually a really helpful backstory for us as women to realize if I'm feeling like maybe I'm in the wrong for being ambitious, here's why. Because in the past, you kind of had to use people to do it.
Yeah.
I don't have to do that now. And I couldn't agree more with you. The women that I know in my personal life that are the most successful, with maybe few exceptions that I can't even think of on the top of my mind right now, they are the most giving, generous. Yes. They want to see me succeed. They're asking me, what can I do? They're connecting me with podcast guests. Like the podcast, we're 3 or 4 months in right now. Like it's a baby podcast still.
Wait, that's crazy.
It's so new. And it's grown the way it's grown because wonderful, successful women are like, you have to talk to my friend. You have to bring this other great woman on. Like, I don't see a woman holding me down or holding me back.
Yes.
That's just not what's happening.
Yes. 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 Oh, exclamation point after exclamation. Yes. I think another thing that maybe affects women in Utah more prominently than perhaps in other geographic locations is this idea of humility. Because I, even not growing up a member of the Church of Jesus Christ, was always held humility as a core value. I think that's also attributed to my Chinese culture. But I think humility on the surface has been interpreted as like, don't take up too much space, like make sure you're always lifting up other people, make sure that you don't draw attention to your accomplishments or your abilities. And I do think humility is about lifting up other people. But as somebody once said, it's not about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less. And the thing is, if you're a woman who has this amazing mind or is super gifted in XYZ area, by allowing those gifts to be visible, the world can only benefit from that. It's not like a sin of self-promotion if you want to let people know that you have this amazing thing to bring to the table. I remember being a missionary, and every time I'd found out that a sister had, training in XYZ instrument or had a certain intellectual passion or was really interested in a particular field, it would just light me up because I was like, this is something that we can use for content for our like social media missionary outreach, which was rolling out during COVID-19. And also those are the things that are going to allow them to connect with, people that perhaps other missionaries can connect with. And even in like organizations like BYU Student Association, having specific skills and talents and letting your leaders know about them, it only helps your leaders. Like your leaders just want to make the organization the best it possibly can be. And the organization is the best it possibly can be when their people are operating at their fullest potential. And I just think the best way that we can support women in making the world better is by highlighting what other women do well, so that we can see that this, I guess, lifting of each other is for the good of all of us, and will very likely lead to another woman feeling empowered to take ownership of what she has to bring to the table as well.
So beautifully said, and really exciting to see you, not at 22, but 24, but still really young, leaning into that right now and saying like, yes, maybe I feel like I should play small in some circles and I'm not going to. And letting that be the permission for another woman your same age or older or younger to say, oh, look, she cares about family. She cares about causes. This isn't about her. And this is how she's doing it, by being bigger, not smaller.
Yes.
And we need this.
Yes.
We need this so much, especially women of faith. We need this. And if the light you're holding up is, here's God, and look how big God is, then why would I play small to that message?
Exactly. And I think it took me a while to come to this understanding, but if it were not for the amazing women who refused to play small that I was watching as a teenage girl, I don't know if I ever would have got here. So I think like women who are watching, don't play small. Just understand that what you bring to the table is the result of hard work, and that you have so much to benefit this world by. I actually watched a podcast with Ilona Mayer. I don't know how to say her last name. I'm so sorry. But she's an Olympic rugby, an Olympian through playing rugby. And the interview asked her, like, how do you overcome imposter syndrome? And she was like, I don't have that. And then she was like, surely. And she's like, Alana's like, here's the thing. Like, I know that I belong here. I know that I've always been athletic. I trained super, super hard for my sport. Our team has worked their tails off. And I don't doubt that I belong here. And I was like, yes, like we need more of that messaging. It's funny because I am like I mentioned earlier, I'm in a male-dominated field, and there are a lot of opportunities for leadership at BYU. And I was talking to a friend of mine. I was like, "You should run for president next year." And she's like, "Here's the thing, right? Like, I never want to run for president because I feel like a boy can always be a girl, but a girl can never be a boy." And I was like, "What?" And then other girls chimed in and they're like, yeah, from the time I was in middle school, it always seemed like if a girl were to run against a boy, like the boys and the girls would both support the boy, but only the girls would support the girl. And I was like, that's messed up, you know? But also at the same time, I think it also leads to self-selection out of these processes. Like if we have more women say, hey, like, what does Chad in the Patagonia vest bring to the table that I don't also bring to the table through my own hard work and diligence? Like, there's so much value to seeing your peer, like to seeing life as a meritocracy, and to know that like you belong in the spaces that you are in and that you want to be in because you're willing to work to better the lives of other people. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. Like making the world better. That's why we develop talents. That's why we get educated, is so that we have more to contribute to this collective sum of human understanding.
Yes. Yep. And seeing someone else model that helps so many, because it's the scariest to be the first. It's a little less scary to be the second. And by the time you've seen 2,000 women do it, it's an expectation at that point. You're like, of course, why would I not be doing this? But for those women listening in who aren't afraid to be the first or the second or the fifth, whether it's in your family or in your career or in your faith, to say, yes, it's scary, but who am I holding up? Am I holding up myself right now, or am I making the collective good better? And if it's that, then you belong in the arena.
Exactly.
Just like that rugby player. Like, I've trained, I've done the work. There's some really interesting statistics about which jobs women will submit an application for versus men. Have you seen this?
Yes.
It's fascinating. And I would totally put myself sadly in the camp of the woman. So the statistics are that women will typically put themselves up for a job if they have like 90 or 100% of the qualifications requested / required, but really just listed on a job application.
Whereas if a man's like, 50% is good.
50% is good. Yes. And I think we can laugh at men like, wow, you're pretty pompous that you think that you're good enough for this position. Or we can say, thank you for teaching me that half is good enough.
Yes.
For so many circles, half is good enough.
Gorgeously put.
And I'm not putting a man down for thinking he's better than he is. I want to raise women to say, put more names in the ring. Try for things that you may not even be those men actually aren't qualified. Those are the qualifications for the job.
Yeah.
If you don't feel qualified, but you want to be in those circles, keep putting yourself in.
Yeah.
Put your name in the hat for now.
Oh my gosh.
And then you'll learn a little bit more about what it's going to take. And that process alone may be the thing that then makes you qualified the next time around. I mean, think about your mom's story.
Right?
Didn't make the cut the first time. And it was a man who, isn't that ironic? That was like, actually, you do have the qualifications.
Yeah.
And so she showed up in the hallway.
Yeah.
We need women who will show up in the hallway and keep playing their song.
I love that. And we need men who will empower the women in their lives to do that.
Yep.
I also think you bring up a good point about how a lot of times this perception that women are less qualified, or that women have about themselves as being less qualified, is nothing more than a perception. I was talking, I've been married for 3 months, and I remember distinctly like the situation where my husband and I were at this event and experiencing the exact same experience. And I walked out of there being like so anxious. I was like, oh my gosh, I hope I didn't make this person feel bad. Like, oh my gosh, I hope that wasn't weird when I said this and all these things. And I was like, no. I was just going off. And then I goes, oh, Ted, how do you think that went? And he goes, I think I'm awesome. I was like, what? I was like, no wonder men have so much confidence. Just be like, oh, I'm just living my life and I'm awesome. And I tried that out for a bit, and it's fantastic. Of course, the anxiety came back at some point because I'm like, do I think I'm too awesome? Oh no, like maybe I should tone it down. But like, there's so much societal conditioning that goes into it though. It's not that like women inherently have less confidence. It's because from the time we're young, we're being shown stories where it's like, oh, you're a princess that needs to be rescued, or we just need to point out examples of strong leadership in the women in our lives. And that's something else my mom did really well, is she's like, hey, I know that there's a lot I can't teach you, but hey, Carol down the street, she's amazing. You should learn that attribute from her. And it just developed this habit in me of like, there's this family in Cedar City that I just admired so much. And there are 2 girls, Lauren and Eliza Allen. And I just look at them and I was like, oh, they're so kind. Like they just are so talented. Like what did they do that I can incorporate into who I am? Because I felt really socially awkward as a young kid. And I was like, they just make people feel so at ease. And this messaging of like women being inherently different from men, I think can be damaging. And touching on something that we brought up earlier, there was another study that showed how women will only feel comfortable speaking in a meeting if there are at least 3 other women in the room there with them. I wish I could cite it off the top of my head, but listeners, you can do some research. It's a real study. And I think that's lame. Like if you're in college, like be the first person in the room to raise your hand. Like if the professor asks a question, like you talk. When I started my business program at BYU, I was always talking. Like every time the question, I was like, okay. And I came to my professor one day and asked like, hey, I just wanted to get some feedback on like, I'm aware that as a professor, it's really important to make sure that everybody in the room is contributing equally. And the reason why I'm speaking so much is because I want other women in this program to feel comfortable speaking. And like, I was like bringing up all my concerns to him. And he's like, hey, as a professor, that's my job. Your job is to get the most out of your education as you possibly can. And like whether or not my peers think that I'm like too much or like too full of myself or whatever is like one thing. And I guess that is an inherent part of being a woman who takes up space is, sometimes that fear of like, people are going to think I'm too much. Maybe some people, but the majority of people are not sitting there judging you and like tearing you down in their mind. The majority of people, if they're like in a good mental headspace, are just listening to the thoughts that you are sharing. And if you have good thoughts, like the whole room benefits from that. Like that's the point of being at university. It's not just to absorb the content, but it's to learn from each other. And whenever my peers are making comments in class, like I think about how I feel. I'm never like, oh, that was dumb, or oh, they're raising their hand too much. I'm always like, wow, like that was a really good point. I never thought about it that way. So I think also knowing that as a woman, like, and not just as a woman, but as an individual, like the sum total of all your experiences and everything that you've gone through, the trials you've overcome, give you a perspective that's uniquely yours. And you never know who's going through something similar, who needs to hear life from your vantage point.
It's so good. We all need to be heard, and there are spaces to be heard. I think it's really us who are holding ourselves back. I think very rarely is it someone that's just like, we really don't want to hear from you. You're not talking enough. I think it's easy to say, but are they giving me a platform, or do I have a position where I can speak? And why wait for that? Go make room. Go make the room that you want to take in a council situation or in a classroom situation. Like, you be the one to proactively do it, and don't play victim to someone else not making room for you at the table. Make room for yourself. Get your elbows out a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Build the own table if you have to.
Build the table if you have to. Tell me a little bit. I want to just hear a little bit more about your experience with the Miss Utah Scholarship Program.
Yeah.
And then some takeaways as the BYU Student Body President.
Yeah.
And what you've learned being in these two different roles in very different types of leadership.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Well, I stepped foot into the Miss Utah organization, not really knowing what I was signing myself up for, but they have been around for over 100 years and really have empowered many women across the country to find their voice and to understand how to present yourself and your ideas and your passions in a way that can be palatable to other people and can drive action. There was a lady named Amber Hulse who was in South Dakota, who is now a state senator, I think the youngest ever. A lot of title holders have gone on to do incredible things. And the thing about these programs is it's not just like, oh, look at all these pretty girls. You win because you have the tallest nose. Like, it's not like a beauty contest. Actually, there are two pageants. One is Miss America and one is Miss USA. Miss USA was formerly owned by Donald Trump, and the criteria for that competition are interview, swimsuit, and evening gown. So a lot of people who go to that route of pageantry are interested in becoming professional models or entertainers, which power to them. But for the Miss America organization, it's for a very long time packaged itself as a scholarship competition, where most of your scores on performing arts talent, your personal interview, where they can ask you anything under the sun about politics, religion, anything crazy. Not anymore, but in the past, it has been known for its really rigorous interviews. Every contestant has a community service initiative. And on top of that, there's some element of like presentation on stage, like your stage presence, how you carry yourself. And growing up as a really shy, awkward girl who tried to cut my own bangs and made them way too short and had like silver teeth because they all rotted out of my mouth. Like, anybody who went to like elementary or middle school with me is like, who is Miss Utah? What? So, but I think it also was the first time where I had to grapple with the understanding of like, oftentimes as a leader, like, you are public facing, like you are being perceived by people, and whether or not they perceive you accurately is not under your control. And it also doesn't really matter. But I think being Miss Utah and being really vocal about my faith and having a platform that isn't exactly the most glamorous, and being the first Asian American title holder, there are often situations where I'd meet people and they already had an idea of what they expected me to be like. Well, couldn't have been further from the truth. But something that I really learned in that situation is that actions speak louder than words. And I think, like, if your heart's in the right place, it doesn't matter what other people think, because if your heart's in the right place, then you will drive the right results. And when your heart's not in the right place, then you personally are going to have a hard time. So when I was going into Miss Utah, I was very focused on making this like something that was principle and mission driven. And I think that totally changed my whole experience. It helped me connect with other girls. It helped me really use it as a platform to share what I cared about. And then when I was competing for Miss America, I felt like I was in a very different mindset, because I was like, at Miss America, I was like, it's a lot more, there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes than just like girls getting scores. And then, and I think part of being a national title holder is that you really have to look the part. And I think I really struggled with like competing at a national beauty pageant. I was like, no matter how much weight I lose, I'm never going to have the right body type. I was just so like concerned about what I wasn't, that I couldn't focus on what I was. And I just did not show up to that competition feeling like I was like ready to be a strong leader and empower women. I just felt scared, and I felt like I shouldn't be here, and is this in alignment with who I want to be? Is my presence at this competition something I want people to immediately think of for the rest of my life? Like there were just a lot of doubts in my mind, and it was nobody else's fault. I want to be very clear about that. It's not the organization's fault. It's not like anybody's fault but mine and my attitude that I have. So that's why I think too, like if you're a young woman who wants to make a difference, your belief in yourself and what you have to bring to the table is so much more important than what anybody else thinks of you, because you have control over yourself. You have control over how hard you work, over how you treat people, and how you show up in the world.
Wow. I mean, it would have been cool if you were Miss America and you could have looked back on that and awesome or whatever. But like this lesson is way more important for the rest of your life, to realize how you showed up in the first one versus the second, and who you want to be in other places that you will be in the future. Way more important than winning a pageant, way more than winning a competition, to say, I know who I am and I know who I'm not for.
Yeah.
And there's certain things that I just need to, we have so many things we should be worrying about as women, as human beings. And if we can get some things off of that plate, wonderful.
I think another theme that comes up with that experience too is like understanding what you want. Because a lot of times we're influenced by what we think we should want or what other people think we should want. And as Miss Utah, like it just felt like such an honor, because a lot of people spend a lot of years trying to be Miss Utah. And it was like, there's a lot of pressure to represent our state well, to represent my board and my organization well, and these other girls that I competed with well, that like in the back of my mind, I was always like, I know I don't want to be Miss America, but I feel like I need to do everything I possibly can to try to be Miss America. And even though I'm glad I worked really hard, like I wish my mindset was still focused on using my time to continually think of like, how can I empower and serve people right here, right now, as I am, not what will I do if for some reason I become Miss America. Like and I think like being in tune with what you want, and even if it's not what you think you should want, is crucially important to making an impact that only you can have. And that's also something that I experienced while I was transferring from Cornell to BYU. Like my whole life, I thought I wanted to be at an Ivy League school. And I literally started working toward that goal when I was 8 years old. So it was like a lifetime of almost indoctrination of like, this is what I want. And I think everything works out for good, because the girl who did win Miss America, Madison Marsh, is amazing. Like she is the first active duty military officer to hold that title.
Wow.
She was a Truman Scholar. She was a Rhodes finalist. And so much of her advocacy is about finding a cure to pancreatic cancer, which she lost her mom to. And she's such an inspiration. I absolutely know that she was the right woman for that role at the right time. And I know that God had other plans for me. And because I didn't win, I was able to marry my sweetheart, and was able to step into this role at BYU, which I think has done a lot more for the people and communities that I care about than I could have if I were Miss America. So like everything really does happen for a reason, I think.
It truly does. It does. And trusting the dream that's in your own heart. Like, I think we know more than we let on. Of who we really are and what's calling to us. But then these societal voices, so many which are very well intentioned from family or from community, faith community, can feel so loud that we start to doubt ourselves and question like, well, am I being ambitious in the negative sense? Am I being presumptuous? Am I like taking on more than I should by having this dream? Or am I doing the opposite? Am I not being ambitious enough because I'm taking a road less traveled? I'm starting a family earlier, or I'm turning away a job opportunity that for everyone else should make sense. But listening to that voice inside you over the long game pays off. You're in the right circles with the right people, with the ability to hold up your light in a way that only you can. And man, can I share something right now, Sarah?
Please.
We talked a little bit about this and I ran it by you, kind of already deciding that it was a good idea in my mind. So I'm glad you kind of think it's a good idea too. But I feel very passionate about reaching women at the stage of life when they're making some of these critical decisions. some high school, mostly college, mostly in that age range, right? And I've thought a lot about like, how do we reach them more with this type of a message, right? How do we talk to women from the listen to your heart perspective, and families are important, and don't undersell your faith, and your voice matters, and all of these. And I had this thought, what if we did like open mentoring sessions on the podcast?
Which I like screamed at, because that is such a cool idea.
So this is totally just like, we're just going to try it.
Okay.
If you're listening to this, or obviously, Sarah, if you have people that you hear like, man, I wish I could just get perspective from someone a little older. I'm not that much older, right? We'd also decided that.
Yeah, she's 25 max.
Yeah. We're going to do them live. We're going to try one. I'm not going to commit to like once a month or something. We're going to try one. So if you are a woman, it could be making these decisions, or maybe you're a young mom, or I'm even going to throw this out there. If you're an older woman who's like making a career shift or entering back in the workplace and you want to do a mentoring session live, please go to my Instagram at Lean In With Lizzy, that's with a Y, and send me a DM of who you are, why you want the mentoring session, and the questions you would ask. And then I'm going to find a friend, maybe Sarah, maybe someone else who I've had on the podcast, and have them come with me. And the two of us are going to just like give our best shot at giving some mentorship. Obviously, we want to help the person who comes on live, but we also want to let everybody else listen in on mentoring, because we need more examples of mentoring. We need to hear like, what should I even take into consideration, and how would women view this and approach this? So we're going to do it.
Oh my gosh.
And I hope I can pull you in for at least one if we make this a long-term thing, because like you have such a gift of expressing yourself, of being very self-aware at the lessons you're learning along the way. I think most women can see back at 30 or 40 in hindsight and think about their experience like you are right now, just a few years out of it. So I think that's really rare and unique. And thank you for
that compliment.
I mean, anyone else who's listening and is like, yep, absolutely. Nobody's that self-aware.
I'm so sorry for the things I said today that were cancelable. It's all well-intentioned. You might need to do some editing.
No, we have to be more frank like this as women. And we have to not be afraid to say the things that some people aren't going to like.
Yeah.
Because it's not for everyone. Everybody has things that are for specific people and specific times.
Yeah.
And your message isn't supposed to resonate with everyone, though I do feel like yours does.
Can I share something that some advice that somebody gave me that changed my life?
Please do.
Okay. So there was a man in my bishopric formerly named Dan Mills, who has accomplished so many incredible things. And the advice he gave me is that if you want to change the world, if you want to be involved in a lot of things, like you have to get used to pissing people off. I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, here's the thing, right? He's like, so many people want me to be involved in so many different projects. And I'm always like, hey, if we're going to do this, it has to be on my terms. And like, sometimes like, yeah, maybe you want me to show up every single day and dedicate like 2 hours a day to this, but maybe all I can give is 1 hour. And you're going to have to be okay with that, because that's just how life works. Like, my time is limited. I want to help you. So I'm going to give my 100% to what I can. And it's okay to say no. And he put it a lot more eloquently, but what I took away from that is that sometimes just the way you distribute your time in order to accomplish your goals is going to make some other people upset, and that is okay, because the people who really care about you and understand the vision that you have are going to be more in tune with what your long-term objectives are, which oftentimes have a much longer shelf life of impact and influence than what can accomplish in just like a matter of days or weeks or months. Okay, but also, can I nominate my dream panel for a live mentorship session?
Oh, yes. Let's see if we can make this come true.
Okay.
Give me your dream panel.
My dream panel: Shima Boffman, Bridget Madrian, Lieutenant Governor Henderson, and did I already say President Camille Johnson or Sister Kristen Yee? Those 4 would be like, I would just like, my soul would leave my body. They're all very busy doing much more important things than talking to me. But maybe not you. I mean, you're pretty important though. So
yes.
You'll have to get a higher profile guest. They'll come, but
yes,
that would be so cool.
I love it.
Yeah.
So many powerful women's voices, and it's just, you're one of them. Thank you so much for being on here, for sharing what you share. And I'm excited to see how your voice continues to be amplified for the people that amplify it for you, but also I know you're going to go do that work and lift up so many in the process. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for hosting.
What an incredible conversation. Sarah's story is proof that age just doesn't define impact, and ambition doesn't need an apology. She's living proof that confidence, faith, and a commitment to growth can pave the way for true leadership. Hopefully, you caught my special announcement that I'm so excited for, that we are going to try a live mentorship episode on the show. If you are a woman who wants mentoring and you're also open to doing it real time on the camera, please DM me on Instagram at Lean In With Lizzy. Share your questions and why you want to be on the show and how we can help you. And don't stop there. Share this episode with someone who inspires you or needs to be reminded of their own power to make a difference. Take one thing you heard today, whether it's about building confidence, leading with purpose, or embracing your story, and put it into action. Until next time, lean into your life and watch how it transforms the world.